I feel so compelled at this point in the session to apologize to all of you for this place. What's been before us this year is really devastatingly unfortunate, and I think in many cases horribly cruel to teachers, to people with disabilities, disrespectful, and I'm sorry, because it just kills a lot of us to watch it unfold. So I'm hoping that it's great folks like you, though, who can start to turn this tide, because I do not believe we can make a reasonable budget out of what we've got. I think we'll begin to run into constitutional issues with the way we will force local districts to fund their own schools, and others will be unable to, and that will not provide for equitable education as is specified in the Constitution. I think the economic problems that Jim pointed out with Medicaid are really real, and the consequences to our economy are quite profound beyond that, because when you lose jobs, you really do dampen any kind of recovery. And Idaho seems to somehow have made itself at the back of the nation's recovery. And those of us who are sitting in this room probably understand why that is. We have done all the wrong things. We have eliminated jobs. We have cut budgets again and again and again when we were already probably one of the most frugal states in the nation, most spar. But I want to talk a little bit about revenue and another piece of our tax code besides the sales tax, because we've kind of dwelled in the sales tax area there. Our income tax code is extremely out of date. Our upper income tax bracket stops at $25,000 right now. That is that's a pretty low place. So that means you make $25,000 and you're paying the same rate of tax as somebody who makes $250,000. So that isn't quite right in my book, I think in a lot of people's book. So we have some room for some upper income tax brackets. I have a piece of legislation, I did have one last year too, didn't get printed in the Revenue and Taxation Committee, so you won't find it anywhere on the computer. I haven't submitted it this year. I don't suspect that it would get printed again, but I'll give it a try. I don't stop. And then I think that's a fairly small amount of revenue, even if we just restored those upper income tax brackets to around the level and then slightly above where they were in 2000 before we cut them. So we've cut income tax rates, which is something that was mentioned earlier, around in 2000, 2001. And so to raise revenue in that area, you're not going to get a whole bunch out of that top area, because most of us make a little bit less than that, or in that area. But there are other options, other areas of the tax code. We've got a three-legged stool, right? It's the sales tax, the income tax, and the final one's the property tax. And what did we do in 2007? We took the schools off the property tax. And we had 3 mills. We had the M&O levy, and I think we can say that that led to some of our precipitous disaster with school funding and with our state budget, because we said, well, we'll pay for that out of sales tax revenues, which now we realize were really abundant because we were really growing rapidly, and we had a lot of development and a lot of kind of mushroom in our growth. But once that slowed and the housing boom kind of burst, we don't have that kind of surplus anymore, and that expectation that we could pay for that property tax funded portion of the schools has dried up. So I also have a piece of legislation that would, and it's not just mine, I have other folks shopping around. I know there are a couple school board members, one gentleman from Chalice Individual who in particular who is interested in this, and so I made sure he got connected with bill drafting. And so he has this piece, and it would take this coming year and put the schools back 3 mills back on the schools on the local property tax. It would then in one year it would lower the sales tax 1 penny, because we have 1 penny of our sales tax that is supposedly just to offset that funding. So it would give us a bridge funding of about $200 million while those schools are already back on the property tax, and then to help us through while the economy recovers a bit. And one of the things that you do notice from this body is that they do talk about the economy in ways that that suit their purposes. We certainly now are talking about this is the new normal. We're at the bottom, as you saw from those graphs, of a serious recession, and when you're still at the bottom of it there, you're starting to grow again, so you're not really in the recession. And they're like, well, we're out of the recession, so why isn't everything great again? Well, if you understand the technical definition of a recession, you know that it has to do with consecutive periods of economic growth or decline. And so we're out of the recession. That doesn't mean we've recovered. And I think it's reasonable to expect we will recover unless we're totally different from the rest of the states in the nation, which I doubt we are, unless, of course, we continue some of these policies we're working on, which are just trying to drive us off that cliff more. But I think it is reasonable to expect we'll recover. And so to say it's going to be like this for the next 10 years, so we have to pass these policies that presume we need to cut our schools forever is just really, in my mind, a bit sinister. There are other revenue options that I want to throw out. I love the idea of broadening the base. I think that's really a wonderful thing, especially since so many of us do spend, maybe even more of our discretionary income on services than we do on sort of basic things like food. I have a proposal that would remove the sales tax from food and extend it to business and professional services only. So it's an exchange. We wouldn't need the grocery tax credit then, and so that would go away as well. And it does generate a fair chunk of revenue, and especially the way I've got it written this year, where it extends the sales tax to business and professional services, which raises around $300 million, and then in a year from now removes the tax. One half of the tax from food in another year, the entire tax. So it gives us a good bit of bridge funding. Pretty soon we don't need the grocery tax credit, so that's another $50 million. So it allows us to just come through this economic hard time, and then at the end of it we come out with no tax on groceries and just the tax on business and professional services, which I think is far less regressive because, as we all know, the income tax takes into account what you make. The sales tax doesn't, and so it's a little tougher on folks to have to pay the tax on food. But I just throw those things out, and I thank you all for being here, and I really thank Shirley and Tom and Bob and everybody for doing this. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's the thing that this building refuses to talk about, and so wonderful that you're here to do that. So, thanks.